Well, thank you, Chairman Van Hollen, Ranking Member Hyde-Smith. Senator Moran is going back to serve as the ranking on the CJS Appropriations Subcommittee hearing that I, too, am supposed to go back to. I am very much looking forward to the second panel. Appreciate Secretary Yellen's testimony and leadership. And Chairman Van Hollen, good to see you leading this subcommittee so ably, and to see the team that supports and makes possible the work of FSGG. Madam Secretary, if I might, you and 5 other former Treasury Secretaries have noted year after year, Congress after Congress, that the IRS lacks the resources to effectively and fully enforce tax payment. In fact, you made the somewhat striking and memorable assertion that the IRS at this point has the fewest auditors since the Second World War. The tax gap is estimated as somewhere between $600 billion and $1 trillion a year, and it is something that is the topic of active negotiation right now in terms of how to pay for a bipartisan infrastructure bill. How would the IRS ensure that new auditors, new enforcement efforts are focused on high net worth individuals, individuals with complex financial situations and international or multinational corporations, which are more difficult to audit, as opposed to lower income people whose returns are more simple to audit?
Well, the purpose of the mandatory funding that the president has requested for the IRS, he's requested $80 billion over a decade, is really supposed to be a long-run program allotment that would enable IRS to hire, train auditors who have the skills and the long-term perspective to be able to focus on high net worth individuals, high income individuals, and partnerships and complex arrangements in corporations. That's where the tax gap is.
Right.
And the purpose of that funding would be to improve compliance in those groups where underreporting is highest.
And what's your rough estimate at this point of the multiplier for dollars spent on additional enforcement, dollars received in terms of additional compliance?
I believe we estimate that the $80 billion appropriation would generate around $240 billion over 10 years. The long-run payoff is, I think it's estimated by the IRS to be close to 5 to 1. And I want to emphasize, it takes a long time both to build up the resources and these complex cases take many years. And so there are enormous gains beyond the 10-year horizon as well that you would see in the budget. So I believe the IRS estimates are something like 5 to 1 in terms of income collected per dollar spent.
Madam Secretary, for the years that I've served on FSGG, I've also paid close attention to the most frequent complaints from Delawareans who often reach out to my constituent services folks to say that they're having difficulty getting someone on the phone, getting their tax returns and refunds processed, more recently getting the economic impact payments. I'm assuming that an increased budget for IRS taxpayer services will directly benefit and impact that. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But first, I'm going to go to a more complex subject for a minute, since we may have a return of another member who wants to question. I am very interested in how you see carbon border adjustments working out, both competitively for the United States and in terms of its impact. I'm someone who's introduced a number of bills, one bipartisan, more recently ones that are just Democrats, that would place a price on carbon, and I'm convinced that that has the single greatest leverage in terms of achieving progress on climate change. I'm the co-chair of the Bipartisan Climate Solutions Caucus, and we've debated and discussed this with many leaders from the private sector, from financial services, different advocates and organizations. And I think that there is a moment here where, as discussed at the G7, the EU is on the verge of implementing a border carbon adjustment. And there is the possibility that the United States, without imposing a fee on carbon, could simply deem the social cost of carbon and of other greenhouse gases at a certain amount and begin to implement that in order to avoid other countries imposing a carbon tariff against our exports and making us less competitive. How do you see that playing forward? What do you think are the models for the actual cost of greenhouse gases sufficiently detailed for us to be able to implement something like this? And how is the administration thinking about border carbon adjustments in ways that would keep American industries and services competitive globally?
So I think we're just beginning to get a handle on this question. There's a lot of work to do to think this through. I mean, as you know, the president has proposed an ambitious and comprehensive agenda to try to reduce U.S. Greenhouse gas emissions, and has made our nationally determined contribution is an ambitious one. And, he's proposed to do that through a whole variety of different carrots and sticks. Remove existing subsidies for fossil fuels, tax credits for renewables and for electric vehicles. He hasn't taken the approach that some countries have of simply having one system with a single carbon price.
Right.
But I think that if we do make the progress that we hope for, that the areas that are covered will be covered, say, by EU carbon border adjustment, that we will also be producing those goods in a manner that is environmentally friendly. And if we are able to do that, my own view would be that we should not be subject to, say, the EU's carbon adjustment price.
So if I hear you right, to summarize, in a larger sense, if the Biden administration's plan and agenda is fully implemented, we ought to be able to go to our Canadian neighbors, to our EU trading partners, and say, we shouldn't be subject to this border adjustment tax because we are making robust progress towards our national goals. Let me just close, and I'd love to hear more from you about this. I was
Certainly.
talking to Jay Powell about this yesterday and the research that's being done within the Federal Reserve System, because there's a lot of research to be done for this to be better understood. I just want to thank you for what I think is an appropriately robust request for funding for the GEF and the Green Climate Fund, a modest but necessary request for $15 million to continue to implement the Tropical Forest and Coral Reef Conservation Act. I'm working with Senator Portman on reauthorizing it. And I'll just simply note for the record that my constituents are pleased when the wait times go down and just desperately annoyed and angry when the wait times go up. And improving IRS service standards is something that I would hope all of us could agree is well worth investing in.
Completely agree. I mean, that's will be an important use of funds is to greatly improve taxpayer service.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chair.